Okay, so what we're going to talk about right now is we're going to talk about how to build rapport during the listing appointment. And really, this is one of the big secrets, in terms of getting the listing. One of the very few times that I ever lose on a listing is because someone has just befriended them better than I have, or for whatever reason they like that other agent better, even though they may have told me or given me the feedback after I had lost the listing that they thought I had the best plan to sell their home. They just felt more comfortable with the other agent. And if you haven't ever called to try to get that feedback as to why you may have lost a listing, a lot of times what you may find is that that's the reason that they didn't do business with you, is simply because they liked someone else better or they felt more comfortable with someone else. So building rapport is actually one of the most important steps of this entire process. In fact, I would consider it a very critical step. And if you do this correctly, people like to do business with people that are like themselves. So you want to be able to befriend them, align yourself with them, and be able to become their best friend and connect with them on their level. And sometimes that's difficult to accomplish when you're trying to conduct business. So there's a time for building the rapport process, and I'm going to kind of walk you through when that time is and how I go about that before I get into anything else. And there is a very specific series of steps, as we've talked about in these videos, that we take from going to the initial information we gather all the way through to the final presentation and pricing suggestions at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, we'll get into the rapport on the listing presentation. Okay, so in the seller counseling interview, if you remember, we went to, we talked about the counseling interview, and I think everybody that I know that's watching this is probably going to skip that because they think it's not important, and I would have too. So I don't feel bad if you have skipped that. Go back and watch it. I'm a little redundant in that video, but there's some really important keys. In fact, the whole key to being able to build rapport in this stage and be able to give an effective presentation later on is understanding everything you need to know before you go on that appointment. So some of the questions that will help you to build rapport, again, it's critical that you're in rapport with them before you start trying to present to them how you're going to best help them, and before you establish the fact that you're an expert, which is what we're going to get into next. But what does the seller like about their home? If you'll notice on the seller counseling interview, we ask them those questions about what they like about their home, what they think is important, what they think are the best things, features that their home has to offer, and then also have they made any improvements? What things did they do to the property? Because always the seller is proud of the fact that they spent money on something in particular. So why would a buyer want to buy their home? That question is another critical question. If you know the reasons why they think a buyer might buy the home, then in that counseling interview you gather all of this information of the things that made them feel good, made them purchase the home, made them feel good that they spent this money on these improvements or whatever. Then they're going to feel really good about it when you make comments and compliment them on the positive things about their home, that you're congruent with them. So it's kind of interesting when you get on the appointment, because there's a critical step in here that I think is important. If it's you and you're kind of a one-man army or one-woman army, then having someone else to do the seller counseling interview does have a significant role in my mind as to establishing me as the expert. It's almost so different than a doctor or an attorney's office. You don't see them asking you all the questions and having you fill out the questionnaire. Never happens. You're always going to be asked by someone else in the office. That's their duty to make sure they gather the pertinent information for them to do the best job for you. It's not going to be prudent for a doctor or an attorney to be the one filling out the questionnaire and filling out all your doctor and previous information and all that good stuff. And I feel like, again, in our industry, it's the same thing. You shouldn't be the one that necessarily fills out that interview. It gives you, it helps to put you in a position of power, in a position of professionalism. So that seller counseling interview, if at all possible, if you have a staff or someone that can do that, and that counseling interview, and I think that's important to do. So I do want to make sure that I mention that. But when you ask all these questions, you're going to have some good information when when you get there on the property. And this is just an example of that form. You can see some of those important things. That target date becomes very important because we understand what their needs are. What do they think the best features of the home are? Good information to know when you get out there, what they think the home might sell for. All these things that we're asking, we're going to utilize in the presentation and in the rapport building process. So meeting prospects face to face, one of the things that I like to do whenever, and I would say when I first got in the business, again at a young age, at 19, I didn't have any knowledge or expertise, so to speak, but the one thing I did have was enthusiasm and excitement. And you really have to get your game face on. If you're going to meet with a client, someone potentially going to sell their home, you need to be at your peak state, as Tony Robbins puts it. You need to be excited, you need to be on your game, you need to be pumped up, you need to be positive when you get there. And regardless of the condition of the property, regardless of the situation, regardless of how your day is going, you have to arrive at a high level with complete confidence that you're going to get that business. And one of the things that we do when we get to the property and we greet the seller and they open the front door, the very first thing that happens is I reach out and I shake the hand of the first person that opens the door. And I immediately can tell by the grip on that handshake whether this is a person that is in the disc profiling, if you were to break it down, if they're going to be a high D and kind of leaning in towards me, or a high I, and they start talking and they're real boisterous, or they're kind of laid back and they're a C and they're cautious and they're loosely gripping, kind of backing off out of my space, out of their not wanting me in their space. But I immediately can get congruent with them by becoming just like them. And it's almost as if as soon as you shake the hand, you should be able to identify the mood and the personality of the person that you meet with. That way you can get congruent with them and get aligned with them as quickly as possible. Also at that point, we're going to determine who the decision maker is. The person that generally will shake my hand first will be usually the decision maker. Not always. In some cases, the way to determine that, every single time I go into a house, I stop, I drop my bag right near the front entrance, and I say, well, so who wants to give me the grand tour? And at that point, we also from time to time, the other spin on that is, you guys ready to get this home sold today? If they're highly motivated and they say that, you can skip a lot of the other things that you have to do. If they're pretty well motivated to get the home sold and they say yes, there's no reason to spend all of your time doing all this presenting. If they say yes to that, you can go ahead and just go right to the paperwork. But those are the two spins on the different questions that you can ask when you get right there to it. And then, as I say, who wants to give me the grand tour? The interesting thing that always happens is either the person that's the decision maker takes me and leads me through the house, or the person that's the decision maker will tell the other spouse to lead me through the house. Now that could be husband or wife, just pay attention to that. But what you'll notice is the decision maker is calling the shots right from the get-go, and you want to make sure that you're congruent with them. If they're aggressive, you be aggressive. If they're loud, you be loud. If they're quiet and laid back, you be quiet and you be laid back. So that's real important at the very get-go. As you start going through the property, there's a real important thing to take note of, and we already talked about it, was the questions that you asked from the time that you were looking at, that you did the seller counseling interview. There are some specific things in there that they told you that they're real excited about, right? So make sure when you get to that point, and it doesn't matter, your job is not to tell them what to do to fix up the house to sell it at this point. Your job at this point is only to connect and befriend them, and that's it. Your job isn't to give them advice. Your job isn't to try to determine what things they need to do to the house and take a bunch of notes and this, that, and the other. You're basically walking through this may sound crazy, but you're basically walking through the property just trying to become their friend, trying to figure out what things that you can talk about that they will connect with, what things you can get them talking about, and then talking about all the things in the property that they mentioned that they loved about the house, and just sporadically mentioning those things. I love this neighborhood. Actually, the playground across the street, I used to play at that playground. When I was a kid, I used to live down the street. So you want to make sure that you're getting congruent with them by pointing out, and they're like, oh yeah, we love the park. Our kids play there all the time. If they mention that that's a reason that they think a buyer's going to buy the home, or one of the features that they love about their home, even if it's painted cabinets that they painted purple, and you're going to tell them later that they have to paint those purple cabinets, then you tell them how great those cabinets are. You did a great job painting those cabinets. It doesn't matter what it is that they did, whether it's right or wrong, or what it is they love about the house, whether it has no bearing on the home sale or not. Your job is to get congruent. Don't worry about the rest of that stuff. You're going to give them advice once it's time to give them advice. You don't have their friendship. They don't want your advice. At this point, you're an adversary until you giving them advice is being adversarial to them. You are not. If you're not congruent, they're just going to say, well, this agent tries to tell me. I can't tell you how many times I've been on a listing appointment and the agent walks in and starts telling them, oh, well, you need to do this, and you need to do that, and you need to do this, and you need to do that. Now, I go in and I say, oh, this is great, this is a lovely house. Oh, I'm holding my breath, literally sometimes holding my breath. It may smell so bad or whatever, but I'm not going to say anything until I know that that I've befriended them, because that's what's best for them. If I've befriended the client, now I know that they're going to be willing and open to listen to my advice, and I'm going to be able to give them the advice that's going to get that property sold. So, as bad as it may be, or whatever the situation may be, hold it till the end, because until you've gotten that connection with them, it's not going to get you anywhere except for out the door. So another, just kind of looking at this page, things that I tried to identify with. I'm always looking for something as I'm touring the home that I can talk about. I can talk all day long, as you can tell on these videos. This one won't be very long, I promise. But I'm looking for things to talk about. If there's a Harley Davidson pickup in the garage, or a Harley Davidson in the garage, I ride motorcycles, I can talk about that. If you've got an Oklahoma Sooner mailbox, I can talk to you about the Oklahoma Sooners, because I'm a fan of the Oklahoma Sooners. If they're even if it's something I'm not particularly interested in and I have some general knowledge about it, I can certainly ask questions and start to build rapport that way. Looking for personality indicators. The Prius in the garage is a good example of someone who saves money on gas. I would hope that I haven't showed up in my Hummer if they have a Prius. Where they're moving to. I've had a situation not too long ago. I was meeting with a client, and we were walking through the property, and I just couldn't find anything, it seemed like, to get congruent with this family. And I tried and tried and tried, and there was just limited things on the wall to choose from. The house was pretty spotless, but there wasn't a whole lot of things for me I was reaching to find something to talk about. And I finally just went to, well, they're moving to Atlanta. I'm going to talk about Atlanta. Hopefully it's a good move, and they're happy about it. So we started talking about Atlanta, and all of a sudden the wife came alive. She was so excited about moving to Atlanta. She couldn't stand it. We sat down on the couch and we talked about all the things about Atlanta that I had no idea about, and why she was so excited to move there, and what they were going to buy when they got there, and how I made them feel so happy, because at this point their home hasn't sold. They're not going to Atlanta. But they rather than focus on that, I want them to focus on what their goal is, what they want to accomplish, what makes them happy. Talk about things that make them happy, not things that make them sad and make them upset. Don't talk about how bad the market is while you're walking through the property. You want to elicit that feeling of feel good. And if you have the enthusiasm and you talk, even if you're going to give them bad news later, but if you do this step correctly, you will always get the business, regardless of who you're competing with and how good they are and all that good stuff. So this is critical stuff as you go through the property. Make sure you're doing that. Personality profiling. So a little bit deeper on that, you need to know the personalities, their personalities in order to build rapport. Determining their personality by what you see in their home, those different things, like if they have a lot of awards and trophies hanging up on the wall, are probably a high I. You want to talk about some of those things, or if their kids got lots of trophies, family pictures, different things that you can find there to determine, okay, well, what kind of personality is this? Okay, they got a Corvette. Okay, well, they like to reward themselves. That's probably an I personality. So you can look and tell by walking through the property what type of personality type they are, and you want to make sure that you're working that angle with them in terms of getting rapport and getting aligned with them. Matching and mirroring. This is a very interesting subject that I've learned quite a bit about recently, and studies have shown is that words only represent 7% of how we influence other people. So if words are only 7%, the voice qualities that we use are 38%, and then your physiology is actually 55% of how people are communicated and influenced by the things we do. So making sure your physiology is matching and mirroring them. And it's funny, it actually happened to me this morning. And I had someone sitting in my, actually that's not right, it was last night. Had one of my agents come in my office, and I started talking to her about something we were working on, and she literally leaned back in the chair as she got more interested. She was like, and you could tell she was a little bit more interested, and she was kind of getting relaxed, and I leaned back, and I mirrored and matched exactly what she was doing, just because I do it inherently now without even thinking about it. And then I started taking the tone of the conversation up, and then I leaned in, and she leaned in with me, and I even got her more interested. But that matching and mirroring as you're talking to them, they're not going to know that you're doing this, by the way. It may sound kind of goofy, but they're not going to know that you're matching or mirroring them. If I'm sitting at a table and someone's leaned in talking to me, I'm going to be leaned in with my arm on the table talking to them at the same pace and the same way that they're talking to me. And when they're shaking their head, I'm going to be shaking their head. And if they're mad, I'm mad. It's amazing how well this works. If somebody calls my office and they're upset and they're being loud and they're all this and they're that, I call them back and I have the same attitude, and I talk to them the same way they're talking to me. And I've got a client that's probably the worst. He actually cussed out 2 of my staff, and I wore him a new one. And unfortunately, I wouldn't have taken his business if I'd have known this character the way he is. But we had taken the listing, and super off the charts deep personality. One of these 3 properties sold yesterday, and the more detail you give him, the more frustrated he becomes. And he got very frustrated with one of my staff for trying to go through the details with him. And I called him back, and I told him straight up. He started getting loud with me. I said, listen here, buddy. If you're gonna da 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 da, and I tell you what, I got so congruent. I wasn't congruent with him, but he thought I was. But we got more congruent because of that. Then I took the conversation from that, that in your face loud like he was, and I took it down, and I said, if you want to talk to me and my staff like a human being, then we can do business together, sir. But if you don't, then I'm going to release your listings today, and we're going to separate and not do business. I said, how would you like to move forward? And he started apologizing, and he started giving us respect. At any rate, those are how matching and mirroring can make a huge difference. You want to become like them using your body and voice, mimicking, mirroring, matching what they're doing, leaning back, crossing your leg, lean on the table. Those things are very, very important to getting congruent with you. They don't know why, but they just kind of like you. And they come to their own conclusion that I don't know what it is about this guy, but I kind of like him. And it's, I'm sitting there doing the same thing, making the same head nods they are, and the same posture and everything else. And they don't know why, but they become congruent and they like you. So very important stuff. Pacing and leading, really kind of just talked about that. It's a way to gain control of that situation. If you're taking it low and you want to take it to a little bit higher level of energy, and you're dealing with someone who's not, a C or an S, someone's a little bit more laid back, a little bit more quiet, you can talk to them at that level and say, and I tell you what, I get real excited when we talk about this, because the market is this and this and this, and you can take that conversation a little bit higher level, or you can take a higher level conversation, you can bring it down a notch. And when you do that, you're going to be able to control the environment and control the presentation and control the way that this presentation and this meeting that you have with that client is going. So really, that's basically it in a nutshell. I think I'll wrap up with the building rapport. Hopefully you see the value in building rapport as you're going through that property, making sure you're talking about the things that the client loves, making sure that you're getting aligned with them, you're paying attention to what things are around you, and using that rapport to take it to the next step. Because now once you have rapport, now they know, like, and trust you. Now it's time to show them that you're the expert. And at this is the point. In the next video, we're going to show you why you as the expert are going to get that business, and why they have no choice but to hire you, because you're going to stand out from 100% of the real estate agents using a market absorption analysis and market data to help advise them to sell that home for the most amount of money, where other agents are just going to do the typical CMA. It's a very, very, very important part of the step. Now you're going to become the expert, now that you've become their best friend and you've connected with them. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you on the next one.